I think that we cannot see the eradication of sexual violence, domestic violence, and human trafficking if we don't address culture. If we don't talk to people about the way that they live in this world and the way that it perpetuates it. I'm a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, and as I lived my life experiencing so much violence time after time again, I got to a place in my life where I needed to know why. Why was this happening to me, and why was nobody saying anything? Why did nobody realize when I tell them what happened that the appropriate response was, get out, this isn't okay? And I realized that we live in a culture that says everything that happened to me is normal and it's expected. So instead of me going to my girlfriends and saying, hey, this person did this to me, and having them say, that's not okay, you deserve more, I would hear, oh, that's happened to me too. It's no big deal, just brush it off. The key aspects of our culture that really need to change, I think, is we need to stop putting so much emphasis on victim blaming, and we need to start being victim-centered in the way that we respond to victims and survivors when they come to us. Meaning we're not going to buy into all of these myths that, oh, because of what she was wearing, she was asking for it, or because she was drinking, she was asking for it, or because he's a male, it's impossible for him to be raped or experience trafficking. And I think that once we remove all these gendered perspectives from our culture, we remove these ideas that women are objects, that they can be used, and that men are entitled to sex, we would hopefully see a decline in seeing all the things that we see, because people would start to realize that I'm a human, I'm not just some girl at the bar drinking. I think the other thing is that getting people to recognize the way that we are so desensitized to seeing that violence. You know, one of the things that I recently talked about was, if you go to a movie and a rape scene happens, if it's a female, we kind of just brush it off. I mean, some people might be triggered, we might think, well, that was pretty violent, but if it's a male being raped, we're either gonna laugh, depending on how the director decides to play it off, like in Wedding Crashers with Vince Vaughn and that scene, or we're gonna be ridiculously traumatized, and it's going to shock us. And I think that that plays to our culture, that when men get raped, we're either laughing about it or that's seen as a real thing. But when women get raped, it's seen as an expectation. I think one of the other things is, when we talk about rape in the media, a lot of times people will use the word sex. So when you think about Jared Fogle, who, the Subway advertiser guy, he's recently arrested and charged with soliciting sex with minors. Instead of saying that, let's call it what it is. It's rape. Jared Fogle raped girls. Sex is a consensual decision that people make without any force, any coercion, and rape happens when there's no consent. And so we need to stop being afraid to say, you raped this person. I think people also are uncomfortable with having to realize that they believe some of the myths, right? They believe that men can't be raped, despite the fact that we know 1 in 6 will be raped before they're 18. 1 in 16 will be raped while they're in college, right? We know the stats of females, 1 in 4 will be raped before they're 18 years old. And 91% of victims know their perpetrator. These aren't strangers on the streets. And so we also have to stop buying into the lie that rapists are monsters. That's one of the biggest things that I talk about, because when we do that, when we demonize a rapist, we remove CEOs, priests, dads, moms, brothers, uncles, teachers. We remove all of these people who are seen and respected in their communities as ever being able to commit that crime. Which means when a victim comes out and says, my pastor assaulted me, or the CEO of this company assaulted me, or my dad did this, or my mom did this, we refuse to believe the victim, because they couldn't possibly have done it, because they're not a monster, they're not a stranger. And I think that makes people scared to think that it can happen to anybody, and anybody around you could be a perpetrator. I think the key is talking about it and being willing to deal with some uncomfortable stuff, and working through that, and knowing that there is healing, and that there's ways we can change it and ways that we can impact it.